Hello, I'm Bruce DePlate. Coming up today on News Talk, with the first big Democratic debate over and behind us, it's back to the campaign trail for the presidential candidates of both parties. And a new sense of anticipation regarding Hillary Clinton's upcoming testimony on Capitol Hill before the House Select Committee on Benghazi. In the meantime, House Republicans continue their search for a new leader. Paul Ryan, a potential savior to some, taking a surprising amount of flack from commentators on the right. We'll discuss these issues and others with two of the best, Politico CEO Jim Vandehei and Chief White House Correspondent Mike Allen. Then, which party is being helped more by the presidential debates so far? We'll have a debate of our own, pitting Democratic strategist Doug Sloan against Patrick Mara, head of the D.C. GOP.
From News Channel 8, this is News Talk with Bruce DePoit.
Hey everybody, welcome in. Gosh, we have such a great lineup for you. So good to have you there this time. Hillary Clinton's performance in Tuesday's debate seems to have reset the Democratic primary chase a bit. And it is placing renewed pressure on Vice President Joe Biden to decide whether he intends to enter the fray or not. The political world knowing that Clinton will be back on the hot seat in a week's time when she testifies before Congress about the death of 4 diplomats in Libya. We are so delighted to have back with us today Politico CEO Jim Vandehei and Politico Chief White House Correspondent Mike Allen. It is, as one might say, 2 for the price of 1. Guys, welcome back. It is good to have you here.
Well, Bruce, thanks for having me. I love what you've done with the place. There was a Halloween buffet on the way in.
That's right. We seek to please. Good to have both of you here. What a time. What an amazing moment to have 2 nomination processes playing out right now. We do not have an incumbent president seeking his party's renomination. So the chase is on both sides. And we have this incredible drama, Jim, playing out on Capitol Hill, where the House search for a new leader to replace soon-to-depart Speaker John Boehner. Incredibly intense. No clear front-runner at this time because the guy many people seem to want, Paul Ryan, seems still to not be convinced he should take the job.
He shouldn't. It's a hard job. I think when you talk about, I think the things you just said are all interrelated. The fact that there's drama on both sides and there's uncertainty in Congress, and that is people have turned, and I'd say turned pretty violently against Congress, against establishment, against power, and that's why you see Bernie Sanders on the left surging. That's why you see Donald Trump on the right surging. That's why you see Paul Ryan, who I'd say is one of the more sane conservatives, somebody who has a really bright political future, saying, I don't want one of the most powerful jobs in the entire world, because he understands that at this moment in politics, particularly for the Republican Party, and particularly for the House of Representatives, it is ungovernable. I don't think anybody, I don't care how magical they are of a leader, there's nothing they can really do to force any changes in Congress, largely because so many of these things are societal and they're structural. And Paul Ryan, who's looking at the long view, thinks he can be president, is thinking long and hard about why the heck would I do that?
When Kevin McCarthy, Mike, decided that he was not going to pursue the speakership, all eyes turned to Paul Ryan. And for a couple days there, the sense was Paul Ryan is uniquely positioned based on temperament and experience, etc., to be the guy who takes the gavel from John Boehner. It's been fascinating to watch in the last 24 hours or so the attack that he has taken from commentators on the right.
Yeah, he is the guy. He is the best qualified. He is the only person that has a chance of doing a deal with the White House, of working with the Senate, working with Democrats. All those reasons are the exact reasons that A, he probably won't get it or would have trouble keeping it, and B, that he would be so unpopular with this uprising on the right. You know, there's a simple calculus for Paul Ryan that Jim alluded to, and that is that if he's Speaker today, he's less likely to be president tomorrow. And that's because the unhappiness on the right isn't going to change. It's not going to be easier to get something done. And we're told that the people on the right have said to him, gone to him with demands. And he's like, I'm not going to answer your stupid demands. If you want me, you'll take me.
Hold that thought. Let's listen to the president describe his decision to keep 5,500 troops in Afghanistan.
Came to a responsible end. That milestone was achieved thanks to the courage and the skill of our military, our intelligence, and civilian personnel. They served there with extraordinary skill and valor, and It's worth remembering especially the more than 2,200 American patriots who made the ultimate sacrifice in Afghanistan. I visited our troops in Afghanistan last year to thank them on behalf of a grateful nation. I told them they could take great pride in the progress that they helped achieve. They struck devastating blows against the al-Qaeda leadership in the tribal regions, delivered justice to Osama bin Laden, prevented terrorist attacks, and saved American lives. They pushed the Taliban back so the Afghan people could reclaim their communities, send their daughters to school, and improve their lives. Our troops trained Afghan forces so they could take the lead for their own security and protect Afghans as they voted in historic elections leading to the first democratic transfer of power in their country's history. Today, American forces no longer patrol Afghan villages or valleys. Our troops are not engaged in major ground combat against the Taliban. Those missions now belong to Afghans who are fully responsible for securing their country. But, as I've said before, while America's combat mission in Afghanistan may be over, our commitment to Afghanistan and its people endures. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not allow Afghanistan to be used as safe haven for terrorists to attack our nation again. Our forces therefore remain engaged in two narrow but critical missions: training Afghan forces and supporting counterterrorism operations against the remnants of al-Qaeda. Of course, compared to the 100,000 troops we once had in Afghanistan, today fewer than 10,000 remain in support of these very focused missions. I meet regularly with my national security team, including commanders in Afghanistan, to continually assess, honestly, the situation on the ground, to determine where our strategy is working and where we may need greater flexibility. I've insisted consistently that our strategy focus on the development of a sustainable Afghan capacity and self-sufficiency. And when we've needed additional forces to advance that goal, or we've needed to make adjustments in terms of our timetables, then we've made those adjustments. Today I want to update the American people on our efforts. Since taking the lead for security earlier this year, Afghan forces have continued to step up. This has been the first fighting season where Afghans have largely been on their own, and they are fighting for their country bravely and tenaciously. Afghan forces continue to hold most urban areas, and when the Taliban has made gains, as in Kunduz, Afghan forces, backed by coalition support, have been able to push them back. This has come at a very heavy price. This year alone, thousands of Afghan troops and police have lost their lives, as have many Afghan civilians. At the same time, Afghan forces are still not as strong as they need to be. They are developing critical capabilities: intelligence, logistics, aviation, command and control. And meanwhile, the Taliban has made gains, particularly in rural areas, and can still launch deadly attacks in cities, including Kabul. Much of this was predictable. We understood that as we transitioned, that the Taliban would try to exploit some of our movements out of particular areas, and that it would take time for Afghan security forces to strengthen. Pressure from Pakistan has resulted in more al-Qaeda coming into Afghanistan, and we've seen the emergence of an ISIL presence. The bottom line is, in key areas of the country, the security situation is still very fragile, and in some places, there's risk of deterioration. Fortunately, in President Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah, there is a national unity government that supports a strong partnership with the United States. During their visit earlier this year, President Ghani and I agreed to continue our counterterrorism cooperation, and he has asked for continued support as Afghan forces grow stronger. Following consultations with my entire national security team, as well as our international partners and members of Congress, President Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah, I'm therefore announcing the following steps which I am convinced offer the best possibility for lasting progress in Afghanistan. First, I've decided to maintain our current posture of 9,800 troops in Afghanistan through most of next year, 2016. Their mission will not change. Our troops will continue to pursue those two narrow tasks that I outlined earlier: training Afghan forces and going after al-Qaeda. But maintaining our current posture through most of next year, rather than a more rapid drawdown, will allow us to sustain our efforts to train and assist Afghan forces as they grow stronger, not only during this fighting season, but into the next one. Second, I've decided that instead of going down to a normal embassy presence in Kabul by the end of 2016, we will maintain 5,500 troops at a small number of bases, including at Bagram, Jalalabad in the east, and Kandahar in the south. Again, the mission will not change. Our troops will focus on training Afghans and counterterrorism operations. But these bases will give us the presence and the reach our forces require to achieve their mission. In this sense, Afghanistan is a key piece of the network of counterterrorism partnerships that we need from South Asia to Africa to deal more broadly with terrorist threats quickly and prevent attacks against our homeland. Third, we will work with allies and partners to align the steps I'm announcing today with their own presence in Afghanistan after 2016. In Afghanistan, we are part of a 42-nation coalition, and our NATO allies and partners can continue to play an indispensable role in helping Afghanistan strengthen its security forces, including respect for human rights. And finally, because governance and development remain the foundation for stability and progress in Afghanistan, we will continue to support President Ghani and the National Unity Government as they pursue critical reforms. New provincial governors have been appointed, and President Ghani is working to combat corruption, strengthen institutions, and uphold rule of law. As I told President Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah yesterday, efforts that deliver progress and justice for the Afghan people will continue to have the strong support of the United States. And we cannot separate the importance of governance with the issues of security. The more effective these reforms happen, the better off the security situation is going to be. We also discussed American support of an Afghan-led reconciliation process. By now it should be clear to the Taliban and all who oppose Afghanistan's progress, the only real way to achieve the full drawdown of U.S. and foreign troops from Afghanistan is through a lasting political settlement with the Afghan government. And likewise, sanctuaries for the Taliban and other terrorists must end. Next week I'll host Prime Minister Sharif of Pakistan, and I will continue to urge all parties in the region to press the Taliban to return to peace talks and to do their part in pursuit of the peace that Afghans deserve. In closing, I want to speak directly to those whose lives are most directly affected by the decisions I'm announcing today, to the Afghan people who have suffered so much. Americans' commitment to you and to a secure, stable, and unified Afghanistan, that remains firm. Our two nations have forged a strategic partnership for the long term, and as you defend and build your country, today is a reminder that the United States keeps our commitments. And to our men and women in uniform, I know this means that some of you will rotate back into Afghanistan. With the end of our combat mission, this is not like 2010 when nearly 500 Americans were killed and many more were injured. But still, Afghanistan remains dangerous. 25 brave Americans have given their lives there this year. I do not send you into harm's way lightly. It's the most solemn decision that I make. I know the wages of war and the wounded warriors I visit in the hospital and in the grief of Gold Star families. But as your Commander-in-Chief, I believe this mission is vital to our national security interests in preventing terrorist attacks against our citizens and our nation. And to the American people, I know that many of you have grown weary of this conflict. As you are well aware, I do not support the idea of endless war, and I have repeatedly argued against marching into open-ended military conflicts that do not serve our core security interests. Yet, given what's at stake in Afghanistan and the opportunity for a stable and committed ally that can partner with us in preventing the emergence of future threats, and the fact that we have an international coalition, I am firmly convinced that we should make this extra effort. In the Afghan government, we have a serious partner who wants our help, and the majority of the Afghan people share our goals. We have a bilateral security agreement to guide our cooperation. And every single day, Afghan forces are out there fighting and dying to protect their country. They're not looking for us to do it for them. I'm speaking of the Afghan Army cadet who grew up seeing bombings and attacks on innocent civilians, who said, because of this, I took the decision to join the Army to try and save innocent people's lives. Or the police officer training to defuse explosives. I know it's dangerous work, he says, but I've always had a dream of wearing the uniform of Afghanistan, serving my people and defending my country. Or the Afghan commando, a hardened veteran of many missions, who said, if I start telling you the stories of my life, I might start crying. He serves, he said, because the faster we bring peace, the faster we can bring education, and the stronger our unity will grow. Only if these things happen will Afghanistan be able to stand up for itself. My fellow Americans, after so many years of war, Afghanistan will not be a perfect place. It's a poor country that will have to work hard on its development. There will continue to be contested areas. But Afghans like these are standing up for their country. If they were to fail, they would endanger the security of us all. And we've made an enormous investment in a stable Afghanistan. Afghans are making difficult but genuine progress. This modest but meaningful extension of our presence, while sticking to our current narrow missions, can make a real difference. It's the right thing to do. May God bless our troops and all who keep us safe, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Mr. President, can you tell us how disappointing this decision is for you? Can you tell us how disappointing this decision is for you?
This decision is not disappointing. Continually, my goal has been to make sure that we give every opportunity for Afghanistan to succeed while we're still making sure that we're meeting our core missions. And as I've continually said, my approach is to assess the situation on the ground, figure out what's working, figure out what's not working, make adjustments where necessary. This isn't the first time those adjustments have been made. This won't probably be the last. What I'm encouraged by is the fact that we have a government that is serious about trying to deliver security and the prospects of a better life for the Afghan people. We have a clear majority of the Afghans who want to partner with us and the international community to achieve those goals. We have a bilateral security arrangement that ensures that our troops can operate in ways that protect them while still achieving their mission. And we've always known that we had to maintain a counterterrorism operation in that region in order to tamp down any reemergence of active al-Qaeda networks or other networks that might do us harm. So this is consistent with the overall vision that we've had. And frankly, we anticipated, as we were drawing down troops, that there would be times where we might need to slow things down or fill gaps in Afghan capacity. And this is a reflection of that. And it's a dangerous area. So part of what we're constantly trying to balance is making sure that Afghans are out there, they're doing what they need to do, but that we are giving them a chance to succeed, and that we're making sure that our force posture in the area for conducting those narrow missions that we need to conduct, we can do so relatively safely. There's still risks involved, but force protection, the ability of our embassies to operate effectively, those things all factor in. And so we've got to constantly review these approaches. The important thing I want to emphasize, though, is that the nature of the mission has not changed, and the cessation of our combat role has not changed. Now, the 25 military and civilians who were killed last year, that always weighs on my mind, and 25 deaths or 25 too many, particularly for the families of the fallen. But understand, relative to what was involved when we were in an active combat role and actively engaged in war in Afghanistan, was a very different scenario. So here you have a situation where we have clarity about what our mission is. We've got a partner who wants to work with us. We're going to continually make adjustments to ensure that we give the best possibilities for success. And I suspect that we will continue to evaluate this going forward, as will the next president. And as conditions improve, we'll be in a position to make further adjustments. But I'm absolutely confident this is the right thing to do, and I'm not disappointed, because my view has always been, how do we achieve our goals while minimizing the strain and exposure on our men and women in uniform, and make sure that we are constantly encouraging and sending a message to the Afghan people. This is their country and they've got to defend it. But we're going to be a steady partner for them. Okay? Thank you, everybody.
President Obama in the Roosevelt Room of the White House alongside Vice President Joe Biden, his Defense Secretary Ash Carter, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, laying out his rationale for his decision to maintain troop levels in Afghanistan at their current levels. The President saying that their mission, the President saying repeatedly that their mission in Afghanistan will not change. It will be one of training and security, not of combat. The bottom line, Mr. Obama telling the nation that in key areas the security situation is fragile and there is a chance that the progress we have made will be lost. We're fortunate to have Politico Chief White House Correspondent Mike Gowan here, along with Politico CEO Jim Vandehei. Not what the President hoped to do. Clearly, he envisioned his deep desire was to have a much more significant, maybe close to total withdrawal of U.S. troops by the end of his time in the White House.
That's absolutely right, Bruce. The President saying here that this is a modest but meaningful extension of our presence. You're completely right. A speech he never wanted to give. The President wanted one of his biggest legacies to be winding down the wars. And over the 7 years, so many of his decisions and statements have been about winding down the wars. But this is a conversation that's been going on for a long time. This was expected, but was clearly triggered by last month the Taliban, or the Taliban as the President calls it, taking over a city. Like, you can't avert your gaze anymore after that. So we were hitting the Twitter during the speech, and what we're seeing Republicans saying is Republicans approve of this, but they think there aren't enough troops left.
Repeated use, Jim, of the phrase, it's the right thing to do. The President in constant, and his team in constant evaluation mode, no matter what the goal and desire might be or have been.
Right, and this concept of, he was asked the question if viewers missed it was, are you disappointed in having to make this decision? And he said no. I think clearly he would be. If you think about the presidency, he's going to leave behind a Syria, an Iraq, and an Afghanistan that are terrific messes, and one could argue they're as in bad a shape today or worse than what he actually had inherited. And he had hoped to end his presidency being able to say, I got out of Iraq and it's not a mess. We got out of Afghanistan, it's not a mess. The world's a complicated place, and I think it's really relevant to the presidential race, and that we spend so much time on domestic issues, but the next president is going to inherit really a terrific mess where, once you put partisanship aside, in some places, maybe impossible solutions when you look at a place like Syria, you look at Afghanistan, which none of this stuff is new. This goes back many, many decades, and many, many people have thought they could find a solution to a place that is, in some ways, like the House of Representatives. Like, it's ungovernable. It's ungovernable, and that is the mess that the country finds itself in.
Jim and Mike, stand by for just a moment. We're going to impose on the two of you just a couple more minutes, a quick break here. Back with much more of our discussion here on News Talk right after this.